Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. And today I'm talking about a topic that, touched me really deeply myself, right? Is this fear that I had and many men that I work with, right, have about choosing the wrong women, right? Or choosing the wrong woman to be with. And what it is there's a lot of things going on here, and I want to talk about those. I'm not necessarily talking about solutions because the solution is bigger than just what I can talk about in a few minutes or, 15 minutes here today. But this is something that kept me from really being in relationship for a long time or being able to be in committed relationships. And actually, I've met men and I know men I've worked with who actually keep them single for decades. That fear stops them from entering into a relationship. That fear of like, oh, well, if I don't make the right decision, then my whole life is going to be ruined. Right. And that's probably one of the first ones we'll talk about is this one of the big fears inside of this, and why men fear choosing a woman is because they have this deep fear of commitment, right? They fear that if they commit to the wrong person, that it will ruin everything, right? Their whole life will be ruined. Or they have this feeling if they commit to the wrong woman, then they lose all their freedom inside a relationship. They won't be able to do the things they want. They won't have the lifestyle that they desire, right? It's a big one, this loss of freedom. And we see a lot of talk, especially, I remember my own father talking to me about, when people get into relationships, they get boring, right? So if we've heard those sorts of things growing up, then it's very easy for us to believe that, getting into a committed relationship will start to erode our own freedom and the things that we want to do and the places we want to go and so forth. And if you're really interested in that concept of freedom, I did an episode about this with a wonderful guest, Jeremiah, and we talked about and that a few, maybe 4 episodes previous to this one, we talked a lot about men and freedom and the masculine and freedom and so forth. Another reason men often really do fear this choosing the wrong woman is this financial concerns, this fear that if I choose a wrong woman, she could potentially bankrupt me or take half of everything I own. And this is something I see a lot in the red pill community getting talked about, is like men getting really the raw deal when it comes to divorce settlements and so forth, right? And there's some overblowing of this problem. It's also there's some truth in it, but there's also some overblowing of this problem, right? This financial concern of like being with the wrong person, like having a child with the wrong person, and then that financially ruining them and they losing half of everything they've got, everything they've worked for in their lives. And I understand it, but I also think you look at the statistics, like men who get married, they are wealthier. Men who get married are happier. That's the kind of other side of it that men don't always think about, right, when they're concerned about this financial side of things. And then there's this concern about compatibility. If I choose the wrong woman in relationship and we're not compatible down the line, then what am I going to do? And I think a lot of this comes down to compatibility, especially sexually, is the fear, right? It's like, if we're not compatible sexually, then what am I going to do, right? Or we're not compatible in terms of our interests and the way that we show up emotionally. What am I going to do, right? I don't want to make the mistake of not getting all those things right at the beginning and choosing the right person. And this this hurts, right? And I understand this, the compatibility piece. But I think inside of this, what's not being thought about is the fact that as time goes on, 2 people grow together, right? And you grow closer with somebody because you get to know them better, the things you're interested in, and so forth. And another really big piece that's forgotten about when you're worried about choosing the wrong woman because of compatibility, sexual and emotional compatibility especially, is you're almost believing that things can't change, or you don't have agency and influence on changing things to go in a direction that you want. It's almost a lack of belief in one's own leadership, or this masculine direction and leadership you could give to a relationship, is not believing you have the capacity for that to direct a relationship in the way that you would like to. And I resonate with this because this was very much me, is I didn't realize that I believe people could change, but I didn't really understand the idea that, you could really lead a relationship in a direction and say, hey, I want more sexual intimacy and depth in these various ways, and be like, let's create an action plan, or I could personally create an action plan or feel into what's desired from both of us and make that happen. This is something that's really forgotten by men. Another reason why men fear this committed relationship and being choosing the wrong woman, is a lot down to their own insecurities about themselves. I kind of touched on its earlier point. It's like not believing that they have the capacity to change and the capacity to direct a relationship in the way that they want. But it's also inside of this, like this belief that if they show vulnerability, then they will be taken advantage of by their partner, right? That their woman will take from them, see them as weak and dominate them in some way if they are vulnerable. And also this insecurity around not believing in oneself to like be good enough, right, in a relationship to make the relationship what we want it to be, right? Because I think that's the piece that we often forget, that men forget, is that like how we show up can really direct and mold a relationship into what we want it to be. It's not necessarily about finding the perfect woman. It's about finding someone willing to create the perfect future, or the future that you both desire. That's the really important part, right? Another thing I see is men choosing, I see this very often, is men choosing partners based on the wrong characteristics, right? They're choosing partners based on how hot they are, or how good they make them look, or how much other men's heads turn, or how attractive they are, or how good in bed they are, or how much chemistry they have in bed, or just general chemistry and so forth, or how much money she makes, or, you know, how good the food is she cooks. Like all these things that are kind of not very deep, right? And if we're choosing relationships based on these kind of superficial pieces, then it's very, very, very common for your relationship over time, when things need to get deeper, that you're just not aware of the things that need to be like considered, like someone's values. Like, what do they want for the future? What sort of life do they want to live? What sort of relationship do they want? How loving and open are they as a human being, right? These are the things we want to really start looking at. Like, or what are the behaviors, like how much are they about growth and kind of like growth minded? How growth minded is she? Like, these are the sort of deeper things to think about, right? If you're worried about commitment, you're worried about choosing a woman, because these are the things that will really make a difference. Because if someone's willing to grow, to be with you and grow into being better, then however they are, if it doesn't work for the two of you, or however the two of you are, because it's also based on your growth mindset and how willing you are to grow as a person, then you can really create your relationship to be whatever you want. And then one of the last things I see for men who are really scared of choosing a woman is this stunted emotional capacity, stunted communication capacity as well. It's like, if you don't see your own capacity to like communicate your wants and your needs and your desires, then you're going to be always afraid that you're going to choose the wrong person, and you're not going to explain what it is that you want, right? That's another thing I see, is like this inability to like really say, I'm feeling this, I want this, I desire this, or even to know that they're feeling feelings and emotions, and that fear that they might be feeling around commitment might not actually be a fear of commitment. It might be just be a fear of feeling not good enough. There's a deeper fear, there's a deeper belief that's happening below it. And if we don't learn this emotional intelligence work, as men, we don't realize there's depths and layers to our feelings and emotions, or the reason why we're feeling something isn't necessarily about a lack of good women in the world, but actually our opinion of ourselves and us not believing we're good men, or we're good enough, or we're good enough to meet the sort of women we want. Like, these are all these little pieces that really show up in our lives when we're afraid to, you know, choose the wrong woman. Because ultimately, if we can really communicate, and we know our own deeper values, and that's something that I haven't mentioned yet, is like, when we know if we can communicate what we want, right, what we desire, how we want our lives to be, and how we want our future to be, in the sort of life and relation we want, if we can communicate that. But before communicating that, we need to know. So if we don't know what it is that we want, and we don't know what it is, you know, who we are, like what we stand for, what's meaningful to us, like what our past pain has been, what our patterns are, right? It's very hard for us to know what it is we want, what it is we want to move towards, the relationship we want to create, the sort of sex that we want to have, the sort of love that we want to be with and express. It's very hard for us to express that to somebody else and then create the relationship we want. So often I see this fear of being with the wrong woman, coupled with that fear, is this lack of self-awareness, lack of knowing self, lack of understanding self, that really holds men back in these areas. So I guess I've explained all these different things, but inside of there, I said what a man can do. You know, learn to know who he is, what he desires, grow in his emotional capacity, this emotional intelligence, is face some of his fears and worries and assumptions about dating and relationships and women in particular, right? And start to look at the commitment side. Because, if you're really afraid of commitment, the chances are that you may well fall into being an avoidant man. And there's a whole ream of work that I do with men, especially around their avoidance, to help them become more relationship ready, right? Because underneath this fear of commitment, I believe almost always there is a fear of not being good enough. There's a fear of not thinking we're going to stack up well enough in relationship, or fear of rejection as well. So it's to work on those sorts of things, and commitment won't seem so scary. We'll be able to express what we want, and commitment won't seem so scary. We'll be able to believe in our choices. When we know ourselves, we can believe in our choices more. And if something isn't right, we can leave. Whereas if we don't know about our choices, we don't know the deeper reason, what we want and where we're going, then our choices are often made on superficial things, as I've said. And that will mean that we struggle when it comes to committing, because we're always going to be in that limbo stage. Or when we're in a relationship and we're not sure if it's right, we're going to sit in limbo a lot. Whereas when I found myself, and I see it with my clients, is when we get crystal clear on themselves, who they are, what they want, what they desire. When they're in relationship, when things are not the way they want it to be, and they can be really clear and express that, then they can exit the relationship if that's the case, or they can create a plan for how to move forward and create the relationship into being what both partners want. But I'm going to stop there. A lot of what I've talked about here in terms of the work to do, the emotional work, the knowing oneself, this deeper sense of who we are, and communication and so forth, things I cover in my upcoming program. The program's happening it starts on the 21st of February. And it's about 3:30 now. So if you're interested, there is a link below. You can fill out a little form, ask for name, details, that sort of thing. And then I will contact you, and we will get a conversation booked in to, start the ball rolling on that and get you to see if you're a right fit and get the application process for you on that. So yeah, if you're interested, there's not much time left if you're listening to it when it came out, this podcast, when it came out. But I've seen miracles happen with this program. I've got some of the testimonials in the show notes, but literally men who relationships have improved. They've started relationships. They've grown immensely in confidence, ability to communicate in their relationship. I've even had partners contact me from men in my programs and thank me for the work and tell me how much of a difference that they've seen in their partners. So you might be a woman listening to this and you might have a partner, and send them the link, send them this podcast episode, send them another one, because sometimes we just need a little helping hand to know what we really need and how we need to show up in relationship. But other than that, I've also got some one-to-one spots open. But if you're interested in that, then you just need to drop me a message. All my contact details are in the show notes. But until next week, ciao.